welcome. My name is Sergey Sokolov. So as part of SBS team, I work on almost with all utilities we see in this room, early stages of the project. And in my role, I support development of architecture. And topic of as-builting comes as a really important and challenging, and that's been obvious through the day, all utilities presenting and referencing as-built as the challenge. Through that exposure, I've been challenged to facilitate discussion and open forum today. And for the record, I've asked for the 8 hours for this forum. But due to our agile approach, so we have 30 minutes, I guess, or less to complete. So let's dive in. And I'll start with kind of objectives. So we look at, we want to discuss as-built process in this group. The best way to do that, we believe, is to share your typical use cases, your scenarios, implementation experience. Basically, share how do you handle as-builting. I think it would be nice if we will be able, by the end of the session, establish some sort of common terminology, define as-built, and actually dive a little bit more deeper, actually understand the role of design in as-builting. I had a kind of a little bit of discussion about this session with some of you, and Brian actually asked me, challenged me with another question. So can you define a design? What is a design? So we're trying to actually, we're attempting to define as-built, but should we start with defining design? I find this question very important, and perhaps as a realization, and maybe a result of this discussion, all of us will need to go back and step back and say, oh, what does it mean? What design means in my organization? What exactly we do? What's in scope for design? Is that responsibility of designer to update EIM with materials, do reconcile, et cetera, et cetera? These are questions that we need to think about. Right now, we'll attempt to kind of solve all the problems at once. So, but I'll warn you, we all need to work together, and I'll need all your support. Of course, first my idea was, okay, can perhaps artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence help us to solve as-builting problem? So the first thing I've done, I've looked at ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot and said, okay, let's us visualize as-builting problem. And to my surprise, and actually I did not give any, like I've just said, electric utility as-built problem. Here's the picture. And the more I look at it, the more I find it really, really kind of talking to me. If I look at in the background, I see a construction crew kind of confused, keeping construction sheets in hands and debating, is that right or wrong? In the middle, yes, we see some electric structure, probably still work in progress, but there is certainly some concerns. And on the bottom, if you look closely, and let me just put a laser point so I can show you. I've realized that's that's the standards book, and the page 1234 that talks about how to attach a crossarm. So, but you see it's on the ground, and on the front we have a designer, of course, puzzled with the results and thinking, did I do that? Did I design? And so that's kind of a lot behind this picture. So is that anything that you find unrealistic in the generate picture, or The designer, and another message, I think it also brings a hope to the process, because you see in the hands of designer there is a laptop, and that means we're talking about digital processes. We don't see on the screen, but probably it has an AUD with all the design. So I have also asked about what are the steps to reduce as-builting. So again, to my surprise, all the points are coming from generic knowledge out there, summarized by Copilot, right to the point. So it looks at we need to make its digital process in order to improve the as-builting. So we need to use mobile application, implement good location, high accuracy GPS, enhance data accuracy, and we've heard that over and over again throughout all the presentations. But look at point number 5, apply intelligent design. And so and again, I have not asked specifically for that. That's just a common knowledge. I want to share with you a common understanding that's out there in the world of domain knowledge, and in this case, what was processed by GPT. So, but that's just to set the stage. Now we're looking at, let's work together and try to define as-built process. So I've tried to do it a little bit of homework for this session, and based on questions I've asked utilities, I came up with some of definitions that there's a number of challenges. There's no ownership. It's a different personas with a different technical tools, work on paper, different goals and performance indicators. So that's one way of looking at as-builting. It's so complex, and it's just, we need to, in order to properly define, address all of those concerns. I've also look at kind of my understanding, and what you see is the bullet that I came up with. Of course, that's just my way to engage you in conversation. So I think about as-builting as a process and a challenge, resulting collaboration of all stakeholders during design. So. And as a result, we need to document the differences in constructions and then correct the records. So there's 3 things we kind of blended in one sentence. Question, am I on the right track here, or can someone from any of like utilities, can you just raise a hand, please, and give us a definition of your understanding of what as-built? Can you define as-built? After approval.
Anything after the designer has approved the job, anything after that is an as-built.
But you defining a gateway, so that's the step. But
Yeah.
What's in scope for approval? What do you do as you approve?
As we...
Like, okay, let us look at this. So maybe I'm trying to help answer this question. So that's where I tried to put bullets that help us to understand what is in the scope for as-built. I suggest we do a little bit of exercise, so let's use our hands. Pat suggested we tap or clap, but I just suggest let's raise a hand. What I'm going to do, go one by one, all these bullets, and it defines certain attribute that is can be changed during construction and is important for as-built process. And if you feel this one is absolutely important, then you raise your hand and we'll put yes. Okay? Yes, there's a question?
So this is just my opinion, but listening to what I've heard today from Encore, and then also what we've heard from UNS in the past few months, I'm finding the as-built is a process, not like where we, at least I did, thought it was at the end of the design and you put it into GIS. And that was it, because it's built in the field. That's what the as-built was. But being a process, and what we've learned from working with all these different companies, is the process is different from one utility to the other. So where we're going to get yeses and nos here will be probably half and half, because some of them, that process will include certain stuff, and some won't, right? So that's going to be part of the challenge.
That's exactly the point of exercise. So
Yeah.
just for everyone to understand where I'm going with that, we'll look at the facts. So by defining what needs to change, we will identify a certain system, and then we will look at different scenarios. So these are different workflows for as-building, and some of you will recognize your workflows. So Paul, that's where we answer your question. So we'll get a bigger picture first. We'll understand what's in scope for design, and then we'll map it to the process. All right, so I suggest we go quickly, and Jim, you're going to help me. So first question, when we get in as-built locations, asset and relationship. So we consider these two impacting as-built, and we always need to do as part of as-built. So that's the question. Is that something you see as always done as a part of as-built? Right, so, and please raise your hand if you believe yes. And I put yes because I believe that's always done. And by raising your hand, you're now participating in our survey. The reason is if you don't raise your hand means you're out of calculation, because when you say no, we will assess based on the kind of, all right, so now we see all hands raised, all people participate in our challenge. All right, excellent. Next, do you always update CU materials in the work order in EIM as a result of as-built? So is that solid yes, Jim, or less people doing that?
Really surprised, but it looks like most
Solid
people
yes.
do not update materials.
Yeah.
I'm
So
kind of surprised by that.
I'm
It
not
seemed
going to
less
change,
than-
but we'll
less than
document. So it sounds like almost yes. Electric connectivity in GIS. Do we or any utilities believe that as part of as-builting results, it also reflects updating
You're not going to get
electric
called on.
connectivity?
Raise your hand. This isn't, you don't have to be scared.
Don't, yes?
One per utility.
All right, so Jim, what do you feel? Is that solid yes, or maybe, or no?
Solid yes.
Solid yes, okay. What about, as part of update, recalculate cost in EAM or whatever tool you use? So is that a part of as-built? That's a solid maybe, yeah, but I sense like 70%, okay? Next, we also, there's another artifact produced during design. We produce project data, customer contracts, and I put XXX or whatever system it is. Is that something you also have to update as part of design? No? All right, so it's looks like a big no, but I'm glad that PG&E is now. We need to think about applying the kind of, put it as a part of as-builting. All right, financial assets, so that's another aspect. Again, as part of as-built, do we update, like in power plant, all the assets, retirement units, property units? Is that something you consider important part of as-builting? I would say 50%, 60%. More hands? I will put my hand 65%. Jim? All
Do I
right.
hear 70? Do I hear
Okay.
72, 75?
Really good. So it looks like financial assets also need to be updated. All the document retention in the document management system, is that solid? Yes? Do we? Let's, don't be afraid to raise your hands. So I don't see, like, Dominion, you're updating document management system with PDFs of the design? No?
Seems to be 50/50.
Big, okay, 50/50, all right. Now, the questions also, we have design, so the question is really important. Let's think about this. Do you update design? Like, you need to revalidate design after you apply as-built changes and revalidate design. Is that a requirement? Is that part of your design processes?
And Sergey, you're separating that from a change order.
Correct. Yeah, I'm separating. It's a change order. Yeah, it is more of as-builting, applying. All right, so we still have, yeah, well, actually quite a few.
20%.
So, yeah, 50/50. Okay. And one more, AUD design, but update not just the model, but update construction sheets, tables, etc. Typically, we see it's done only in order to create a construction package. But the question is, I'm not afraid to ask it, do we have utilities who would want to update construction sheets as well after? Yes, we have this. Really, that's very, very cool, really. So we have utilities who updates construction sheets after construction is done. So we need to understand that. All right, so you see where I'm going with that. So we talked about as-builting, but as-builting is what? It's.
Could I ask another?
Yes, others, yes, please, I forgot.
How many are doing detailed analysis of the gap between as designed and as built in order to feed back into your standards group?
Oh, analysis, that's really good, yes.
There's a percentage drop.
Yeah, but we have to account for that. That's an important part. Yes.
I don't know if this relates to other utilities, but we have a different department that completely takes care of the reconciliation and the as-built process of construction versus design. Us designers are completely out of that process. So it might be appropriate to, if any other designer groups have that as well, you might not be asking the right audience for that as-built information. So just keep in mind, for SDG&E, that's a completely different group that takes care of that.
That's a good point, though. So your as-built process is totally unrelated to your design. Is there a feedback loop, or would that be a standards update?
So we do some pretty good collaboration on most large designs, not like maintenance and stuff like that, but one of the biggest drivers of a as-built process for us is that linemen want to build it the way they want to build it. Even though the design is completely constructible, safe, meets standards, they just have a preference. And it's not lines across the board. You could have collaborated with one crew, and then they don't end up being the crew that build it, and the crew that builds it wants to do it different. So I think that's our biggest stumbling block with the as-built, is that it's not to standard and it can't be built. They just don't want to.
Okay, so is that related to assess performance of crews? Is that the right way to define it? Designers?
Assess the performance. I'm running.
Okay. Okay.
I had a question for the groups that said that they're out of the as-built process, so like SDG&E. So when construction deviates from design, is there not a feedback loop where they come back to design groups and get that validated? Or is there a separate group entirely that actually even handles those inquiries and documents it?
So to So we give a buffer about 5 feet typically if they want to move a structure, like a handhold, if there's something in the way that we didn't see. But a lot of times if there's changes that impact circuitry, impact engineering calculations, will require FCO. Now, a lot of times there's footage changes. You can't get footages always perfectly, like cable lengths. So the crews, they will write down the numbers of what they actually use, the real lengths, and add any CUs that might be missing. That doesn't require FCO. They can add in their own labor units what they actually need charge for. Then our Aegis department, which is also the records holder, so they update GIS, they do the reconciliation. They'll actually take what the crews wrote down or pencil whipped, and they will do the changes and input the numbers, generate a final as-built report. They'll stamp a sketch with the final as-built as well, and that will become our legal document that they use. But to answer your question, that would be a field change order that we have to generate if they are completely deviating from our sketch would require. What was that? If that's what you call it, we just call it a field change order.
All right, so I suggest we move on. Marina,
Oh,
please. One
I was
more
just going to
question.
chime in for Encore.
Yeah.
We used to do that model of where we had a records department that was for reconciling, but we found that most of the time they didn't know the ins and outs of the actual project and the changes and design decisions that were made for the as-built. It became much easier to have it be done by the designer itself, also gave a little bit more ownership and responsibility for that work order. But in a general sense, when we have as-builts, we're not using the data to help the standards team. We're using the data of the difference between the estimate and the actual to help our financials, to help us address design issues, crew issues, more about alignment on how our processes are working and whether or not we're building constructible jobs. Very similar to Hydro One in the sense that the feedback is guiding how crews want to build, right? It's not a wrong standard, it's just a preference, and we're trying to make sure that we stop doing that and we build things to spec, because the spec is there for a reason.
Yeah, that's an excellent comment. And actually, I added tune the design process based on the feedback. So we really always need a feedback loop back to configuration of AUD. And we understand if there's lots of as-built requirements, that means we have not done our job in configuration properly. So it's always ongoing process. Excellent point. Now, let us pay attention to that screen, really. There was a reason for me to ask these questions. And the reason is we need to identify where the results of as-builtings supposed to be applied. Look, most of these results from as-builting supposed to go back to the system of record. We are talking about GIS, EIM, power plan. So, or it is an analysis based on the feedback. So it's kind of manual in a certain system. And the reason I want to stress that we need to really be careful in understanding as-built, how it's related to AUD and design. So we need to use, I believe, the right tool at the right time of as-builting process, because now we know what data expected to change and in what system. So the important part is to find the right tool. But now we have at least our reference, so how to do that. I suggest we switch to the next discussion point, and we will document with percentage. I know Jim put some notes on this is like more common, this is maybe not that common. I would like to talk about this when as-builting is done. Slide a little bit later. It is a part of the workflow. So now we define the scope of as-builting. Let's look when this as-builting happening in your end-to-end design process. Yeah, we know this happens in different stages of design. We said it can be done in most cases after design was submitted and played to GIS first time. Sometimes we hear it like as a pre-post. So it is, that's one of gateways where people say, no, it starts after we played in the GIS, because that really creates a different approach in the design. Of course, it may be considered when start after design was approved. That's what Encore suggested. Anything after approval is as-builting. And we also learned about pre-construction as-built, during the construction phase as-builds, after construction phase complete, design as-built. So what I hear, there are lots of variations, and that's where I believe Paul was going on with his comment. He is saying it is a problem with the process, right? So it's not necessarily data, it's a problem with the process. I suggest let us dive into this topic and understand, is that a problem in the process? And if it's a problem in the process, can we solve this problem? I will be using typical design workflow diagrams. I have only 3 diagrams, so I'm planning to stay within like next 10 minutes. And I know I'm between you and playing golf, so, but we need to complete this exercise. So be with me. Simple diagram. I'm glad that Encore already presented some of key concepts, went over. We are skipping all the steps of creating work order, doing detailed design and cost calculation. Our focus is on the last, on the part that's related to as-builting. So we have EIM, field mobile and construction, design, and GIS mapping. So all 4 lanes in the picture. And the first approach, what we see as a very common, implemented in quite a few utilities, after construction, as-built markups captured and communicated. Dashed line means manually processed by GIS Mapper. GIS Mapper plays the design, applies on top the as-built markups, and it's committed to GIS. And in this scenario, in this real implementation utility, they have also implemented interface from GIS to EIM system. And guess what? This actually solved many, many problems in as-builting, because as they updated major assets in GIS, and that interface took care of reconciling some of materials based for those assets in EIM. In this scenario, what's important to realize, key points, there is no pre-post. Everything is kind of depends when construction's complete. There is interface, so it's nice and straightforward. Update in one place, done by GIS Mapper. One example, it works, but it requires interface. So in this case, there is no need for additional tool to reconcile CUs in EIM. Quick questions on this example.
So in this scenario, you're essentially saying that the first time this job will appear in the GIS is after it has been built in the field?
Yes.
Just to clarify.
Yeah. I'm trying to see, like, go in order of implementation complexity. Next scenario. We've heard through the presentation that many utilities do that. It's important to do a pre-post because of the need to early update ADMS, OMS, and get some feedback. So in others, systems will see what's design is going on. So this diagram reflects, so we have design updates, and the mapper executes pre-post. And it's in the GIS system. But then during the construction complete as-built markups, they going into the mapper and to mapper and GIS technician, the mapper manually applies those as-built commits to GIS. This way you remember all these bullet points, location, connectivity will go into GIS, but there is required a separate process of as-built in reconciling CUs and updating the EAM system with CUs. So in this way, in this case, or in this scenario, typically we see a mapper updating manually to update GIS, and there is a maybe tool or in AUD to resubmit updated design CUs to EIM. But it doesn't change design, it only changes design CU. So that's another implementation scenario we've observed, and that's try to solve, find a way to resolve, address all these bullets we identified. So information about location connectivity goes to GIS, major CUs updated, and by the way, in most utilities, what we see is EIM is a kind of treated as a gateway to power plant and other financial systems that keep track of assets. So by the main reason, and that's another, you remember our bullets, the main reason for as-built of major assets is not necessarily a cost. It's really an opportunity or ability to use that process to update a power plant. So it becomes a kind of gateway. Any questions related to this specific scenario? Does it make sense, or you see the kind of a pattern of adding complexity and how it works?
I see most people are nodding. Everybody here is okay with the term pre-posting? Everybody's okay with that and what that means?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pre-post or like first playback of
As
design.
soon as you release the design, there is a posting that goes up to GIS so that everyone can see it as designed in GIS.
So now this is kind of one of most complex, in my view, scenarios. And we remember, in this case, there is no integration point between GIS and EIM. I'm kind of stressing the differences because you see, if we take one of those scenarios and we add a missing link, then the situation will be completely different. So as-built can be done technically differently. So all these points are important. And in this complex scenario, we have a mapper doing receiving designs from design as a part of pre-post. It can be done even before approval, actually, because in our best practices, we don't want designers to be constrained when I want to share my design. If I want to publish it so others can see, that should be done, possibly done. It may go into GIS or may go through design container kind of into preview. Then there may be design changes and we need to update GIS. So it's again goes through the playback manager, but we expect to submit only changes. And then captured as build goes to designer, and designer kind of updates design and publishes updates back to playback manager for mapper to execute. So this process is really complex, and then complex not because of is something that it is basically enforced by by the business process. That's how we expect designers to complete their work. So we need to provide dynamic, ongoing updates to OMS, ADMS, or other consumers. So there is a business need for that. But that's the kind of extreme, most complex, and that's where those as-builts applied. The challenge is, and that's where we need to kind of realize, we use design tool in this case to kind of propagate the changes to other systems. that's the big question. So do we really expect done through AUD, or there may be other mechanisms like using mobile applications? And we're going to talk about this. So let's me pause here, and any questions related to this diagram, this process?
I do.
Okay, Pat.
So
please.
when you're saying playback manager, first yellow box on the bottom there.
Yeah.
If it's in design container, I don't really have to go through playback manager because the data wouldn't be
That-
available to other systems,
That's correct. I put
depending on the GIS.
depending on the business process. So what we have seen, and 50% of utilities is just goes to design view, to design container, but in some cases it's one of So maybe the first is not really playback manager, it's just pivot.
And the second question, Sergey, are we using the term construction and energize kind of interchangeably? Energize is really a pure GIS.
Excellent question. So let's utilities answer your question. So who can take on Pat's question and answer it, please?
Energized, Idaho Power. Energized for Idaho Power. Anyone else? Anyone else? So, at design.
I'll try my best. So for us, energized means that those facilities are ready to be connected and have energy flowing through them, but we do want to see them on the system as proposed assets at any time up until that point. And so I would play back before, it would be a separate step before energization. Energization would be, I have no more work done. I have no more work left to do. So I don't know if that fully answers your question,
So
but
you would have a proposed status, constructed status, and energized status,
yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
Usually they're the same.
I'd
Okay.
have so the way we've fully decoupled the concept of construction completion from energization, because sometimes you have additional construction to do and you can't energize the facilities, like pulling poles or something like that.
That's what I was getting at.
There's a couple of more people. Pat? Okay. Paul?
Full disclosure, I used to work at a utility, but I'm kind of curious how other utilities handle this. Our process was, the plant close was EAM process. So the close date for financial reasons was different than our energization construction, so it would as-built in GIS, but we may have landscaping or other things outstanding, so plant could be in service and energized, but the close for financials was a separate process that closed on the EAM side. And so you have, depending on the system, a close date or an energization determines splits in that process. I'm curious how that works with other utilities.
So I'm Jennifer Netches. I'm a T&D design supervisor at Tucson Electric Power. We're owned by Fortis and under the UNS umbrella. So right now this has been one of our heartaches as we've gone through the process with as-built. We have our design team, we do not do as-built, and we have our GIS mapping team that handle all as-built. So there's been a struggle. It's caused some friction over time. Going back to like the feedback loop, our feedback loop is nothing more than we get notified by the GIS team when the as-built comes through that additional design work needs to be done, and then it goes through our resource management, our project management team, and then back to design leadership to do. So we're trying to shore that up. We don't always get a phone call from line construction, right? Because again, sometimes they want to do what they want to do to make it easier, or if they're under the gun for priorities, they're just going to do it. But we are trying to figure out what's the best way to handle the as-built, because when we think of as-built, we think of the final project or the final design coming back from line construction, and that's all handled by our mapping team. So with us, I think what we're thinking about, we're considering using our designers to, if the crew, as part of the feedback loop, if the crew is going to make a change in the field, they have to call us. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. And then if it's a significant change, like a pole needs to be relocated 20 feet, if we need to cut in a PME, cut in any additional, if they need to relocate a transformer, whatever that is, we're going to make that right in the AUD so that we can shore up the design and have the actual design itself be whole. And then mapping will take care of the assets, whatever was done in our Maximo and ArcGIS utility network. So we're doing both at the same time. Currently, we use GE Small World, which is no longer supported, and Bentley, the BOW tool. So they actually go into the Bentley and they can make their changes there. Our designers actually design within the GIS system, which is a Small World, which is kind of backwards, but we've pigeonholed ourselves into these processes a little bit. So yeah, that's what we're hoping. Like, we were hoping to learn from everybody here, like how you do it, lessons learned, what's the best practice, and then hopefully it'll just end up building the relationship between the two groups, right? Because they are at the back end, and it's frustrating when they get stuff that comes in and it's not right or whatever. And then on our side, you know, we're the design experts. We know what's happening, and you know, and there's a lot that goes into a project, right? Before you even release it for construction, land rights, everything, permitting. But yeah, so I think one of these two here would be a better solution for us, perhaps, yep. And, but yeah, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I mean, this is our first time. We're just in the high-level modeling phase right now ahead of configuration, and we've just learned so much from everybody, so thank you.
Oh, thank you for your comment. That's what you just stressed is very important. If I reflect, it is important that, well, you do design, you're already engaged your field crews and like reviewing design, providing early feedback. So the message is don't wait for as-builds to come and then shock you. Wow, like, I mean, why don't we just cover during final preparations of as-build, look at constructability and other aspects early and adjust design before it goes into construction. All right, so additional questions or Paul?
So just a comment, just the experience of the past few years of working with you guys on different projects. Mostly the teams that are working currently on GIS as your design tool, where this as-built-in kind of fits in because you're working in the same system as your mappers are working in. So you can basically make changes as the job progresses much easier. But with AUD, it's a standalone, and GIS is going to be alone. We have to synchronize that message back and forth properly if the as-built process starts at an earlier stage. The other part I want to kind of raise caution in, and it's just a food for thought. We just have to make sure we, you know, account for it in the process, is if a job takes a year, AUD is going to have change in that year. You're going to update your rules, you're going to update your CUs and so on. So you need to be able to accept those or account for those if you're going to go through the as-built-ing through AUD and play back through the whole process.
Thank you, Paul. That's very important. And we kind of, the more we talk, the more it occurred to me that it's a challenge in the process. We have lots of tools to work with, but the process is important. We need to account for the timelines and changes done in GIS, in design, in construction, and an EAM for compatible units. So there's all the complexities coming to play. So